Dr. Tyson, this is Houston. Please call the station for a voice check.
Station, this is Neil deGrasse Tyson. How do you hear me?
I hear you loud and clear aboard the International Space Station. It's a pleasure to speak to you today.
It is my pleasure to speak with you, Shannon. How are things up there on orbit?
Things are absolutely fantastic up here in orbit. It couldn't be a better place to be.
I was going to say, how's the weather there? But of course, above the sky, there is no weather. It's not every day one gets to speak to an astronaut actively floating in space. I've got a zillion questions that I'm sure most of my audience and I even want to know the answer to. So if I go rapid fire, are you ready for this?
I'm ready. Fire away.
Okay. I have to know because when I go on long car trips, I get a little queasy stomach, and I'm pretty sure that weightless is an extreme version of that. And I see that you've been on at least a half a dozen, 7 or 8 missions. What do you ever get accustomed to being weightless, or is there a sort of a queasiness every morning after your breakfast?
Actually, this is my first trip into space, and when you first get into space, it feels a bit odd. It is a very unusual situation to be in, but depending on the person, your inner ear settles down fairly quickly. Mine settled down right away, and I had very little trouble adjusting to zero-G.
So you're really good at amusement parks. You're not one of these people who we have to keep rushing to the bathroom on the on the exciting rides.
That's true. I am a big fan of roller coasters, so I have no problems with those.
So I see, if I have your bio correctly here, you've got your degree in physics, a BA in physics, as am I, by the way. It's a great perspective on the world. And you went on for a PhD in space physics. And is this the kind of background that every astronaut requires, or you're a particular kind of astronaut for this mission?
Well, we have astronauts from all different backgrounds, some from the military, some from the civilian world. And in general, astronauts have a background in science or engineering, mathematics, medical field. So we have lots of different types of astronauts. And for me personally, I'm obviously a scientist-type astronaut.
And what's your relationship to robotics? Because clearly robotics is such a fundamental part of the future of space exploration. So is that part of your expertise in your formal training?
It is actually, and in fact, it's part of my history of working at the Johnson Space Center. We have several robotic arms up here that we use, the biggest of which is the Canadian robotic arm, and I have been trained to use that and have used that while I'm up here. The Japanese have a robotic arm, and for both of these, we can move payloads, equipment, and with the Canadian arm, even move people around.
So you've got so you have the ideal dream job for a kid that ever plays video games. You're just controlling things through remote control, and that sounds like a kid's dream.
Absolutely. It was certainly my dream, and it is, I can't even describe how much fun it is to operate the robotics and to be up here.
And so you mentioned various robotic arms. Does the United States have a robotic arm up there?
We do not have one of our own. All our arms have been built by our international partners.
I understand you're speaking to us from the Kibo Japanese module up there, and from what I understand, the space station is this amalgam of national modules where astronauts from the various participating countries conduct experiments of interest to their nation or their scientists. And I'm just curious, in each module, do they serve their sort of local food? So if you wanted like a Russian cuisine one night, you just sort of float over to their module, or you want some sushi, you go to Japan? What's the coordination of these various modules, and how do they work together?
Well, to answer your question on the food, we do have a variety of food up here from all nationalities. So yes, I can have Russian food one night and Japanese food the next night, and food from Europe the night after that, and of course American food. All the modules, all the laboratory modules work together, and we are scheduled, scheduled to work in just about all of them. So I have conducted experiments for the Japanese in the Japanese module, for the Europeans in the European module, and of course for the Americans in the American module. And the Russians are heavily conducting experiments down in their module.
So you've been to Russia before. How is your Russian right now? And I understand that you're coming back in the Soyuz capsule. I visited Russia some years ago and got to visited Star City, and they had a mock-up of the Soyuz. I barely fit in it, but I guess you're not in there for very long. You're just coming back to Earth's surface.
Coming back, yeah, we're only in there for a few hours. Coming up, it was about 2 days that we were in the Soyuz module. I'm actually on the co-pilot on the Soyuz module, so my Russian is very technical in nature, and it's good enough to communicate with the control center and with my Russian commander on the Soyuz.
So if you see something really cool out the window, you have no Russian for that. It's got to come out in English, I guess.
It would probably pop out in English first, and then I know a few Russian words to say how cool things are, but it would be a short conversation.
Now, I did some back-of-the-envelope math here, rather simple math, I think. You're going about 18,000 miles an hour sideways around the Earth, taking about an hour and a half. So you should be getting about 16 sunrises and sunsets a day. Is that calculation accurate?
That is absolutely correct.
Okay, so if you get that kind of view of the Earth, you get like lead stories on volcanoes or hurricanes or oil fires or things that reveal themselves on Earth's surface. Is there anything you can report on in the last several days that you've seen, or do you look out the window at all?
I do look out the window a lot whenever we have a chance to. The ground keeps us pretty busy, and so don't get to spend many hours a day looking out the window. One thing about going around the Earth, you don't always cover every part of the Earth. So when something interesting is happening, say the volcano that's been erupting in Indonesia, we've actually been traversing that part of the world during the nighttime, so we cannot see it easily from space. But we've seen lots of hurricanes from up here, and the oil slick in the Gulf of Mexico was very easy for us to see from up here.
So that's interesting. So the things that you notice, it's not obvious, I think, to the average person that you don't see the entire Earth in every view. You're a couple of hundred miles up, so your horizon of view from one edge to the other, it might be 1,000 miles, I suppose, or less. So you don't have a complete Earth-wide view, and for that reason, things could be happening that would take several orbits for you to catch up with, I guess. Is that right?
In a sense, that's right. We do have the cupola that's on the station, and it gives us a pretty good 360 view of the Earth. So I can see the Earth's horizon from one end to the other fairly well. But of course, you're looking at a long distance at a pretty shallow angle, so you're not going to be able to see what's happening on the ground pretty far away. So you really need to be going over something to get a good view of what's going on underneath you.
See, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't make a good astronaut because I would just, park an easy chair up in the cupola and I daydream all day there. So, but on that subject, what are your particular tasks in your time in space?
Well, I've done quite a variety of things. A lot of experiments I've done and helped the ground do. Really, a lot of it is setting up the experiments so the researchers on the ground can run them remotely. I've been involved as a test subject for a lot of the medical experiments that we're doing. And then, of course, as I've mentioned, I've done robotics activities when we had our spacewalkers outside. I was on the inside helping them with robotics.
So what's an example of the guinea pig type things that you were subject to? Just curious, if you're not only conducting the experiment, you're also the human subjects of physiology experiments. What might some of those be?
Well, some of what we're doing is there's one interesting study that I think is on nutrition. We've known for a long time that when astronauts are in space, they lose muscle mass and bone density, and we're actually looking at how diet can mitigate some of those effects. We're looking at how the types of protein a person eats and the amount of potassium a person eats will actually perhaps lessen the amount of bone loss they get. So few times that I've been up here, while I've been up here, I've eaten a special diet, and then I have to give samples, blood and urine samples that'll be studied once they return to the Earth on the shuttle to see how my bone loss is progressing.
So just like hospitals down here on the surface, they're pulling liquids out of you at every chance they get.
Pretty much, except with the blood, we have to do it ourselves.
Oh, wow. So that's part of what it is to be the right stuff, to pull out your own blood. The last time I gave blood, I was very queasy and lightheaded, and so I guess I would only just be the adequate stuff for space.
Yeah, I really felt sorry for the people that were the guinea pigs when we were training to learn how to actually take blood, because we had some very brave volunteers that we got to practice on.
So a few more things here. With regard to space food, what is your favorite? I spent some time filming for Nova Science Now at the Johnson Space Laboratory, the food laboratory there, and I remind people they don't like when you call it a kitchen. It's like a food lab, and I got to taste like a 20-year-old pork chop, and so is there some favorite or least favorite food that you can report on while you're up there in the American cuisine part?
Well, it's funny you should mention the pork chop, because the pork chops we have up here hopefully aren't that old, and they're actually pretty tasty. So I always enjoy that. We've got some barbecue beef that tastes pretty good. It tastes like barbecue from home. So that's always I always enjoy that when that shows up in the menu. Some of the other things, variety of vegetables, it's pretty standard fare up here. The biggest difficulty I have with the food is it's rather monotonous. We just don't have that much variety.
And have you been thinking about what it might be to travel to Mars? Because you're up there, folks on the space station, when they're up there a long time, it's maybe a few weeks, at most a couple of months. But of course, Mars is a multi-year mission. And is that something you might volunteer for if it comes near enough in your life? And if it is it something that scares you a little to be away from home that long, or to be away from a home-cooked meal for that long? What's the psychology of you and your fellow astronauts thinking about such a trip?
You know, it's a very good question. These days, when people live on the space station, we live for about 6 months at a time. So it's a pretty good chunk of the year that we're away from home. And then with training, I was in training for this mission almost 3 years, actually 3 years. So I spent a lot of time away from home. So the time away from home, it would not be that difficult per se, except that you wouldn't be with your friends and family for that long. So it is a bit difficult. Yeah, I would certainly consider a mission to Mars if that opportunity came up. It would certainly be quite a fantastic thing to do.
Now, I notice you're also married to an astronaut, so just send him along too, and then you're good to go.
Yeah, that would work for me. I don't know if NASA would go for it. That'd be fine with me.
That's true, because married people aren't always tranquil with each other. So we'll have to monitor that one real closely. And I want to nip it in the bud here and now, that because I can tell people, but they just simply don't believe me, that so I need a real astronaut to say to our StarTalk listening audience that there is no zero-G room you walk into in Houston, down in Houston. That in fact you have to sort of simulate zero-G in this huge swimming pool, and you only experience zero-G in these airplanes that give you these parabolic orbits, or just in orbit. So I needed you to say that. So please go ahead and do that, because no one believes me.
Okay, well, they ought to believe you, because that's absolutely correct. There is no zero-G room, and we do simulate working in space in our swimming pool. Of course, when you're in the swimming pool, you still have a sense of gravity. You still feel up and down, and if you're upside down, the blood rushes to your head. So it's not an exact analogy of being in space. And we do have the zero-G plane that does the parabolas, and on your way down, you get about 25 seconds of zero-G at a time.
So those planes, yeah, I guess one day I'll try to do one of those planes. But like I said, I get a little queasy even just in cars. So that's not the number one item on my list. But so this is interesting. So you train in this huge swimming pool, and how accurate is that for your actual tasks in space?
Well, I have not been able to do a spacewalk myself, but from what the swimming pool is primarily used to train the spacewalks, and I hear it's a very accurate simulator. When folks go outside to work on the outside of the station, they say it looks exactly like being in the swimming pool, so I hear it's a very good simulator to be in.
And tell me something, since you have a background in physics, if I were in the space station, all I'd be doing is sort of inventing physics experiments that will do different things in zero-G than they would on Earth's surface. Is there some bit of physics you can share with us where in orbit it's just really cool to do and to watch that no one on Earth would have any sense of because we're just sort of stuck here in a 1G environment?
Oh, there's so many things you can do when there's no gravity around. Of course, a lot of the fun things to do are things like playing with your food and making little bubbles and have them go here and there. There's a lot of different things. It's tough to say right off the top of my head what some of the really cool things to do, other than playing with your food.
Yeah, that's what I would do all day. I would like flick peas around and watch them ricochet off the sides of the off the sides of the module. In fact, I wonder how much food is embedded in the electronics up there anyway, because the temptation to do that has got to be huge.
It is huge, but of course we have to clean everything up, so we have to temper our excitement with the realities of keeping the station clean.
There's a lot of talk about whether we live in a risk-averse time because the astronauts are sort of the best example of very visible people, unlike mountain climbers where you don't necessarily know who they are, but they put their lives at risk. Astronauts are some of the most visible people in society, yet you willingly strap yourself into a machine that launches you 18,000 miles an hour into orbit. So how do you do the cost-benefit calculation in your own head about the risk? Or are you just that special subset of human beings that they see a risk and they say, I'm all for it because I'm ready for the adventure that it brings me?
I think it's a big combination of different factors for me. I've been fortunate, having worked at the Johnson Space Center my whole career, that I know the engineers who are building the hardware. I know the managers who are making the decisions about how safe the hardware is and whether or not we're ready to fly. So having sort of that inside information, there's a lot of comfort in getting onto a rocket and coming up here. But by the same token, just like you say, there is a certain aspect of me that says, hey, this sounds like a great adventure. Let's just go do it. And I think that's sort of innate in humans to go explore and go further and go learn new things.
I surely think it's innate in the species, but it's certainly not innate in every member of that species. There are people who would just always take the safest way around. And so we're all fortunate to be in the company of folks who see risk as a fundamental part of what it is to be alive and to advance all that the human species is. Without folks such as that, I guess we'd all still be in the cave. We're running short on time, but I will try to end with some of your thoughts about the future. There's a lot of talk about space tourism, and you look at all the training that astronauts famously go through to go into space, and then at the end of the day, someone says, "Oh, I got $20 million. I'll just buy a seat and bypass it all." And what's the attitude that the astronaut corps has to tourism, or what is your general sense of the future of tourism in space?
Well, a couple of things. I think tourism is definitely the future of what will happen in space. And as far as the tourists who have bought seats, they do get a certain amount of training. They go through about 6 months of training in Russia before they're allowed to get on a Soyuz rocket. So they're just not walking in up to the counter and plunking down their money and flying. So they have to be trained on how to operate in a rocket and how to operate in a space station. So I think one of the biggest hurdles that we're going to have to face with space tourism is they need a destination destination to go to. And so I really hope that some of these companies that want to build hotels in space or other places for people to go, hope they're successful so we can have a destination for the tourists, and then we can continue to conduct science on the space station, which is a national laboratory.
Oh, so that's great, because the national laboratory, like the other national labs across the country, like Los Alamos, and I was around on the NASA Advisory Council when we were talking about possibly converting the space station into that status. So that's good. That's good to hear. And so this is great. Shannon, thanks for being on StarTalk Radio with us. This has been exciting for us and for our listeners. It's not every day we get to speak to someone on the job who also happens to be just floating 18,000 miles an hour sideways around the Earth. And good luck on the rest of your mission. And maybe we can do this again sometime on the next mission, possibly to Mars or whatever is in line for the space program today.
Well, thank you. It's been my pleasure to be able to speak with you today. And sure, anytime I'll be happy to speak with you and speak with your listeners. It's been a thrill.
And when you come back, maybe we can run into you on Earth's surface. Just remind me quickly, what's your hometown and your high school you went to? Because the folks at hometown love astronauts. They're like the best loved celebrities there are.
Well, interestingly enough, I'm from Houston, Texas, and I am the first native Houstonian to fly in space. And I went to Westbury Senior High School.
Wow. That should be embarrassing for Houston for Mission Control to be there, and then you're the first one. So maybe you'll be the first of many, because it just takes a role model to make that happen.
I agree. I hope so. I hope a lot of people follow in my footsteps. But let's be fair. It's a lot of people apply for the job, and the United States is a big country, so we got a lot of qualified people all over the country that apply.
All the more that makes you the right stuff, and the rest of us just adequate stuff. All right, we're done. So Shannon Walker, thanks again for being on StarTalk. Enjoy the rest of your mission. Signing out.
Thank you very much.
Station, this is Houston ACR. That concludes the event. Thank you.